Hello, class. This will be my lesson on chapter 10 in the Lunsford book titled Evaluations. This lesson is really important because this will be what we're going to be discussing in our second essay, right? Part of a huge part of critical thinking is how you make a critical evaluation. And Lunsford does a pretty good job here of adding that to the conversation, thinking about how we critically evaluate, right? As I've said in your prompt run through, or maybe when we talked about claimcast, I want you to really think about this is how you prove your critical worth, in a sense, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, this is what we want to do, right? Ultimately, as critical thinkers, okay? Is how do we critically evaluate a complex set of terms? And you'll be doing this in any discipline, whether it's psychology, sociology, anthropology. If you want to be a doctor, a nurse, right? You will critically evaluate um, constantly throughout your life. And this is what I want us to really think about when we engage with this here. Okay, so this is a tool that will be beneficial. And this is why, in my opinion, one of the reasons this is a transfer level course is um, at the next level, they want to make sure that you are a critical evaluator. So this is important for me. Okay, so think about it this way. We're not just going through this lesson to understand how to critically evaluate for this essay number 2. More than that, this is a way to understand how we evaluate certain works and certain texts, ideas, critical thoughts, assertions. Okay, think about the political climate right now. Okay, so we have to, if you want to come with it, you got to be critical with it. Okay, this is part of that. So if you want to turn to Everything's an Argument, Lunsford, we are on page 224. We're going to start there. Obviously, I'm not going to go through the whole of the thing, but the whole of the chapter. But what I would like to do for this lesson is sit with this chapter a minute, give you a little bit of, you know, understanding of what our essay will be about or what I'm expecting really. Okay, and I kind of build off from there, right? So we start off on 224, kind of simple, right? We constantly evaluate whether it's coffee and whether it is a movie, Citizen Kane versus Avengers, stuff like that, right? We can think about this. At the top of 225, Lunsford claims every evaluations are everyday arguments. Okay, by the time you leave your home in the morning, you likely made a dozen informal evaluations, right? Think about what you're going to wear for that day, how you're going to dress, etc. You selected neat but informal clothes because you have a job interview with a manufacturing company looking for machinists. Okay, chosen low-fat yogurt, fruit over the pancakes, right? We evaluate constantly. Okay, at the end of that first paragraph, in each case, you applied criteria. Okay, I'm gonna write that down because that's important. This is going to be important, as I explained in our prompt run through. When you build a criterion for the panopticon, this is what I want you to engage in. Okay, let's go to the second paragraph here on 225. Some professional evaluations require more elaborate standards, evidence, and paperwork. Imagine an aircraft manufacturer certifying a new jet for passenger service, but they don't differ structurally from the simpler choices that people make all the time. Okay, this is what we're going to discuss here. People love to voice their opinions, they always have. In fact, a mode of ancient rhetoric called the ceremonial or epidectic, okay, was devoted entirely to speeches of praise and blame. Okay, today's rituals of praise and blame are a significant part of American life. Okay, those who would choke at the notion of debating causal or definitional claims will have happily spent hours of praising the Oakland Raiders, Boston Red Sox, or Pittsburgh Steelers. Trust me, do this all the time with my fantasy football bros. Okay, who's a better player, right? Who's a better wide receiver, running back, all that good stuff. We do that all the time. Okay, let's go to 226. Criteria of evaluation, and this is specifically important here. Okay, when we build a criteria of evaluation, this is going to be specifically important, like I said, not just for your essay 2, but moving forward when you have any kind of critical evaluation claim. Okay, let's read that first paragraph on 226, right under the respond. Arguments of evaluation can produce simple rankings and winners or can lead to profound decisions about our lives, but they always involve standards. Key thing, and I'll write that down. Right? I'm taking notes with you here. We got to create standards. I'm going to pause here because I want you to think about this idea specifically with the essay. When we are creating standards, what would you argue are the standards for Foucault's understanding of what a true panopticon embodies? This is important because this is part of the criterion you are building of the panopticon. This is where it matters. Okay, so what are the standards of the panopticon is a great question that I would mean to ask, right? Touched on that just a little bit, but I want to move forward here. Okay, The particular standards we establish for judging anything, whether political candidate, consumer product, work of art, or career strategy, are called criteria of evaluation. This is what we're getting to it, okay? Criteria of evaluation, okay? Sometimes criteria are self-evident. A truck that gets 9 miles per gallon is a gas hog. Piece of fish that smells even a little bit off shouldn't be eating, okay? But criteria gets complicated when a subject is abstract. What constitutes a fair wage? What are the qualities of a classic song? What makes an event worthy of news coverage? Struggling to identify such amorphous criteria of evaluation can lead to important insights into your values, motives, and preferences. Here, I want to remind you of what we discussed in the claim cast lesson, because the claim cast lesson is going to be really important for essay number 2 here, because the Lunsford authors do not engage in the resemblance claim, okay? But once you establish a criteria, say for example, specifically for this essay, of what Foucault's panopticon embodies, okay, then we are going to have to, for this essay, obviously not have to, but we are going to accomplish this, right? What are we going to accomplish? We are then going to, after that criterion is built, establish how both works represent these criterion, okay? That makes more sense, okay? Because it's not just one, okay? And what I mean by that, we'll get to in here in just a minute. Why make such a big deal in the second paragraph under criteria of evaluation? Why make such a big deal about criteria when many acts of evaluation seem effortless? Because we should be suspicious of opinions we offer too casually. Very important, okay? Think about providing evidence. Evidence is fine, but if somebody does not really get a grasp of what Foucault's panopticon embodies, the true criterion, and that's what I'm testing you on as well. If you can prove that with your in your essay, right? Then I could just, hey, a panopticon is really like this prison, and it's more than that, right? Prison is too surface level, right? It's a specific type prison, and the specific aim of the panopticon is to kind of trick in a sense, but also always be present in a sense, right? Unverifiable. Am I being watched? Am I not being watched? Is somebody in that tower? Somebody not in that tower? Okay, so that's part of it. It's not just a prison. Like Foucault says in the beginning of that piece, it's not a dungeon, right? A dungeon is a different type of prison. Panopticon is like, no, instead of being underground, we want to see you at all times, or we want you to think that you're being seen at all times. Okay, super important. Spontaneous quips, and snap judgments can't carry the same weight as well-informed and well-argued opinions. Serious evaluations require reflection, and when we look deeply into our judgments, we sometimes discover important questions that typically go unasked, many prefaced by why. Okay, let's go to these bullet points and then we'll move ahead here, okay? You challenge the grade you received in a course, but you don't question the practice of grading. I love that. It's so true. Okay, you argue passionately that Democratic Congress is better for America than a Republican one, but you fail to consider why voters get only 2 choices. Super key. I 100% agree. It's my personal preference, but I get it, right? Like, why, instead of looking at the kind of surface level of what it's given to us, why not get a little bit deeper? Why do we have the criterion of just having 2 parties in a sense, right? You argue that news coverage is biased, but it doesn't occur to you to ask what makes an event worthy of news coverage, okay? Push an argument of evaluation hard enough, and even simple judgments become challenging and intriguing. 300%. Let's go to the top of 227 and let's close read this first paragraph. This is really important to me. In fact, for many writers, grappling with criteria is the toughest step in producing an evaluation. It's important, in a sense. We're gonna, when you think about thesis statements, your thesis statement is very important. I would argue this is similar, because if you have a weak criterion, similar to a thesis statement, if your purpose of your essay is weak, if you have a weak criterion, the whole essay could crumble. So it's really key. I'm not trying to scare you here or, try to make it so, gloom and doom. But a strong criterion produces a much stronger essay, because it's really what you're talking back to here. Okay, because then you're going to talk about these specifically: Baldwin, Get Out, and the Get Out film, but Jordan Peele's Get Out film, right? So Going to Meet the Man, Get Out, and how they represent how they talk back to the criterion of Foucault's Panopticon. Okay, so that's super important, and I wanted to touch on that. Let's move ahead to the next. And obviously I want you to read this here, because on the middle of 220 you talk a little bit about bias, but for the sake of this lesson, I want to kind of move forward here. Okay, let's go to characterizing evaluation. This is very important. Okay, so I'm in the bottom of 229 here. One way of understanding evaluative arguments is to consider the types of evidence they use. A distinction explored in chapter 4 between hard evidence and constructed arguments based on reason is helpful here. We define hard evidence as facts statistics, testimony, and other kinds of arguments that can be measured, recorded, or even found. The so-called smoking gun in a criminal investigation. Okay, we define constructed arguments based on reason as those that are shaped by language and various kinds of logic. Okay, so we see hard evidence. Okay, and then we also see constructed arguments, right? But we're going to need a little bit of both. Let me move forward here. We can talk about arguments of evaluation the same way, looking at some as quantitative and others as qualitative. This is important here, and I will take a minute with this. Quantitative versus qualitative. What are the differences is key, right? If I were taking notes on this, I'd kind of make a bracket here. Or not a bracket, but maybe like a line that divides, so we can see the differences here. Let's think about quantitative arguments. Bottom of 229. Quantitative arguments of evaluation employ criteria that can be measured, counted, or demonstrated in some mechanical fashion. Something is taller, faster, smoother, quieter, or more powerful than something else. Okay, so you can see what? If I were to write a note on that, that is a, and you've probably studied this in statistics classes, right? But this can be measured, right? Maybe in philosophy too. Okay, measured for qualitative. Okay, it can be measured, almost like a physical measurement if you want, if so. Okay, that gets a little bit murky, but we can move on here. Okay. In contrast, qualitative arguments rely on criteria that must be explained through language and media. This is where we're getting for this essay. Okay. This is not measurable, right? In a sense, like, oh, on the panopticon meter, Baldwin measures a 7.1 and Peel measures a 8.3, right? Think of like running backs. Like you can say, oh, this is a better running back. Why? Because, oh, he averages more yards per carry or batting average, right? But then you're like, well, this dude has 20 more home runs, right? So he's not an average. You know what I'm saying? So that's where the quantitative can work. But even then, somebody who feels like, oh, the best player in baseball does not have the best hitting average, just the most home runs. That's where you would get qualitative, right? And then start saying, okay, no, well, his team has more wins, etc., right? So criteria must be explained through language and media, alluding to such matters as values, traditions, and emotions. Something is more ethical, more beneficial, more handsome, or more noble than something else. A claim of evaluation might be supported by arguments of both sorts. Okay, so this is something that, and like I said, we're not gonna say one outweighs the other. It'll be up to you to prove that, right? If you want to have a quantitative, like these are the Baldwin has number more, just measured like 6 instances of representing the panopticon versus, Get Out's 5. Sure, I've never seen that type of essay, but that would work if you prove it with evidence, right? You back it up with receipts. Okay, I'm not going to touch on the specifics of quantitative versus qualitative. I want you to read that yourself on 230, 231. I kind of just brushed through that, but definitely think about how you can do that here. Okay, how we are going to use quantitative evaluations and qualitative evaluations to make our claim here. Okay, let's move ahead here. I want to go to 233. Okay, developing an evaluative argument. Okay, and this is what we are doing in our essay, right? I do want you to review the claim cast. Okay, we are not just doing the evaluation, there's also resemblance, and I apologize if I sound repetitive, but I'm repeating this for a purpose because it is that important for this prompt. Okay, but how do you develop an evaluation argument? This is key for me here, right? Let's take a look here on page 233, excuse me. Developing an argument of evaluation can seem like a simple process, especially if you already know what your claim is likely to be. To continue the movie theme for one more example, and if you've seen Citizen Kane, amazing movie. It's arguably probably the best movie ever made. That's debatable, obviously, because there is Batman and Robin. Just kidding. Citizen Kane is likely the finest film ever made by an American director. Okay, having established a claim, you would then explore the implications of your belief, drawing out the reasons, warrants, and evidence. Okay, let's pause there, underline that. Reasons, warrants, evidence that might support it. Let's look at this here, and you can think about how you're going to do this in your essay in 233. Claim: Citizen Kane is the finest film ever made by an American director. Reason: because it revolutionizes the way we see the world, right? Warrant: great films change viewers in fundamental ways. Evidence: shot after shot, Citizen Kane presents the life of its protagonist through cinematic images that viewers can never forget. This is important here. If you want to create your own table before you write this essay, be a helpful exercise. Claim, reason, warrant, evidence. James Baldwin's Going to Meet the Man is a stronger representation than blah, 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 because it has blank, right? Um, Great films change viewers in fundamental ways. By examining the panopticon, right, you can think about how both authors, blah, 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 blah. Maybe only, think about racism. We haven't talked about that too much, but racism is a prevalent theme between these two works. Racism cannot be divorced or distanced from power and surveillance, in my opinion. This is something they also touch on. How then do we prove that? If that's my warrant, what is my evidence? Okay, these are the specific ideas of, or specific examples used from both works. Okay, let's go here. The warrant here is in effect an implied statement of criteria. That's awesome. Okay, I really like this chapter. I really feel Lunsford is hitting this very sharply here of how to build an evaluation claim. In this case, the quality that defines great film for the writer. It may be important for the writer, I'm in the middle of 233, sorry, to share that assumption with readers and perhaps to identify other great films that similarly make viewers appreciate new perspectives. That's a great way to put it as well. Imagine somebody when you were writing this, maybe they've read the Baldwin. Probably most definitely they've seen Get Out because it's more current, contemporary, and mainstream, right? But they don't know about the Panopticon. Awesome opportunity to teach them, to say, hey, look, Peele creates a horror film, or some people call it dark comedy, a horror film that it's not just a social commentary, it's much more. It is a unraveling of what Foucault defines as this panoptic reality of surveillance and power, etc. Okay, let's go to the bottom of 233. Formulating criteria. Although even causal evaluations, this band sucks, might be traced to reasonable criteria, most people don't defend their positions until they are challenged. Oh yeah? Writers who address readers with whom they share core values rarely discuss their criteria in great detail. Similarly, critics with established reputations in their field aren't expected to restate all their principles every time they write reviews. They assume audiences will, over time, come to appreciate their standards. Okay, indeed, the expertise they command becomes a part of their persuasive ethos. We know really well what ethos means, right? Still, criteria, ethical credibility. Still, criteria can make or break a piece. This is key. Top of 234. Still, criteria can make or break a piece. For this essay, I really want to emphasize, don't let the criterion of Foucault's Panopticon break your piece. I've seen it happen, unfortunately, and I don't want that to happen with you guys. Okay, so spend time developing your criteria of evaluation. What exactly makes a shortstop an all-star? What marks a standardized test as an unreliable measure of intelligence? In cases like these, list the possibilities and then pare them down to the essential qualities. Okay, what is an essential quality of what Foucault determines as a panopticon? What makes a panopticon true? This is what I'm looking at, not the physical prison. Bentham, and I want to reiterate this too and emphasize here, Bentham's panopticon is the physical manifestation of what he envisioned the prison to be. Foucault, on the other hand, takes that and says, this is a theoretical, social, cultural, okay? You're most likely, I'm in the second paragraph on 234, you're most likely to be vague about your beliefs when you haven't thought, read, or experienced enough about your subject. This is important. You have to sit with it. You have to sit with the panopticon. You have to understand what you're reading, ask questions, review the strong lines, look at the class discussion, okay? But I want you to think about, or I don't know if that was a discussion, I apologize. Look at your own strong lines, but revisit those strong lines and really think about what Foucault is establishing here, okay? How are you going to teach the panopticon? Push yourself at least as far as you can imagine readers will. Anticipate readers looking over your shoulder, asking difficult questions. Say, for example, that you intend to argue that anyone who wants to stay on the cutting edge of personal technology will obviously want Microsoft's latest Surface Pro because it does so many amazing things. But what does that mean exactly? What makes the device amazing? Okay, is it that it offers flexibility of a touchscreen, boasts an astonishing blah blah blah, high resolution? These are particular features of the device. But can you identify a more fundamental quality to explain the product's appeal, such as the Surface user's experience, enjoyment, or productivity? You often want to raise your evaluation to a higher level of generality, and this is what we're doing here. No surface level analysis. You need a higher level of generality and specifics. I think that's what's kind of missing here. Okay. Actually, let's go to the next paragraph. Be certain too that your criteria of evaluation apply to more than just your topic of the moment. Your standards should make sense on their own merits and apply across the board. If you tailor your criteria to get the outcome you want, you are doing what is called special pleading. You might be pleased when you prove that the home team is awesome, but it won't take skeptics long to figure out how you've cooked the books. So if this helps you, if you choose Baldwin, imagine somebody arguing with Get Out as a stronger representation. If you choose Get Out, vice versa. Think of Baldwin, somebody arguing on the other side, that Baldwin, how would you counteract that? How would you win that argument? That's important. Okay. We can go to, we'll kind of run through these really quickly. I don't want to make this too long. Okay, but 235, making claims. In evaluations, claims can be stated directly or more rarely strongly implied. For most writers, strong, so I'm in the middle, sorry, 235, making claims here. For most writers, strong and specific statements followed by reasonable qualifications work best. Consider the differences between the following three claims and how much greater the burden of proof is for the first claim. J.R.R. Tolkien is the best writer of fantasy ever. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings is a better fantasy series than J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, even for children. Third, for most readers, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Return of the King offers arguably a more profound examination of evil than J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Here's a second set of examples demonstrating the same principle, that knowledgeable qualifications generally make a claim of evaluation easier to deal with and smarter. Okay, don't want to read those two, but we can think about how these are more developed as we go along here. They're obviously longer as they go along here, but I want you to really make an assertion of how much more developed and specific these claims become. Okay. The point of qualifying, I'm sorry, let's turn to page 236 at the top. The point of qualifying theses like these isn't to make evaluative claims bland, but to make them responsible and reasonable. Consider how Reagan Tankersley uses the criticism of a musical genre he enjoys to frame an assertion he makes in its defense. Okay, and this is about dubstep. Structurally, a dubstep is a simple musical form with formulaic progressions and beats, something that gives a musically tuned ear little to grasp or analyze. For this reason, a majority of traditionally trained musicians find the genre to be a waste of time. These people have a legitimate position. However, I hold that it is the simplicity of dubstep that makes it special. The primal nature of the song is what digs so deeply into fans. It accesses the most primitive area in our brains that connects to the uniquely human love of music. Tankersley doesn't pretend that dubstep is a subtle or sophisticated musical form, nor does he expect his argument to win over traditionally minded critics. Yet he still makes a claim worth considering. Okay? And that's awesome, right? Even if somebody does not agree that Baldwin exemplifies any of the panopticon, guess what? You're backing it with what? Qualifying evidence that supports your claim. And I'm saying this not just for this essay, but this will happen in life where people are like, well, it doesn't matter. But you're like, well, or maybe they strongly disagree. That's fine. Instead of making this snap judgment, as we discussed before, or making a snap kind of observation, no, I have a critical, evaluated assertion I'm making here. Because then if I get blowback or somebody debates me, guess what? I have evidence to back it up. Especially with the Medicare for All is a great debate. Anything, the border wall, I don't care, right? So for me, if I make a snap judgment, oh, we need this, we need that, we don't need this, we don't need that. What makes it a critical evaluation is like, I know what the criterion is, and maybe that's like mass immigration, for example. Like, what does that constitute? Immigration by itself, super complicated topic, obviously. How then do I make an evaluation claim based on that? Okay, and that would be like the quantitative versus qualitative as well, stats, etc., versus qualitative, the human side. Okay, let's wrap it up here on 237. How are you going to present this evidence? Okay, I'm right in the middle or the top there of 237, presenting evidence. Generally, the more evidence in an evaluation, the better, provided that the evidence is relevant. For example, in evaluating the performance of two laptops, the speed of their processors would be essential. The quality of their keyboards or the availability of service might be less crucial, yet still worth mentioning. But you have to decide how much detail your readers want in your argument. For technical subjects, you might make your basic case briefly and then attach additional supporting documents at the end. Tables, graphs, charts for those who want more data. Just as important as relevance to selecting evidence is presentation. Not all pieces of evidence are equally convincing, nor should they be treated as such. Select evidence that is most likely to influence your readers and then arrange the argument to build toward your strongest points. In most cases, the best material will be evidence that's specific. This is where I would underline or pause for a minute. In most cases, the best material will be evidence that's specific, and this is for every essay, detailed, memorable, and derived from credible sources. Perfect. The following example comes from a celebratory defense of art and artist by musician, songwriter, producer T-Bone Burnett, delivered at the 2016 American Fest Music Festival in Nashville. The energy of his language and the memorable examples likely solidify, great word, the case that music is foundational to the American mythology. I agree 100%. I love that. What a T-Bone state here. This is the story of the United States. A kid who walks out of his home with a song and nothing else and conquers the world. We have replicated that phenomenon over and over. Elvis Presley, Rosetta Tharpe, Johnny Cash, Howlin' Wolf, Mahalia Jackson, Bob Dylan, John Coltrane, Billie Holiday. In evaluation arguments, don't be afraid to concede a point when evidence goes contrary to the overall claim you wish to make. If you're really skillful, you can even turn a problem into an argumentative asset, as Bob Costas does in acknowledging the flaws of baseball great Mickey Mantle in the process of praising him. Let's go to 238. Bob Costas states, none of us, Mickey included, would want to be held to account for every moment of our lives. But how many of us could say that our best moments were as magnificent as his, right? And that happens all the time, right? Think about politicians. Obviously, none of them are perfect. But we understand, hey, they have shortcomings, but this is, after I know what I want in a politician, even despite those shortcomings, if I find the evidence that makes them a great politician, after I've built a criterion of what a great politician embodies, then you can make that claim. So it doesn't have to be so black and white where like, oh, they didn't check every box, right? So that gets tricky, okay? Like for example, if you were to make the panopticon strictly about the physical, there would be a number of things that would not work in Get Out, right? Oh, they're out in the open. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Baldwin, oh, this is, a story of a lynching, unfortunately, and a story of, control and power in a racist part of our country. But, we got to start thinking about, well, how does that represent the idea of what Foucault embodies in the panopticon, the criterion there, right? Power, surveillance, unverifiable power, right? You feel like you're always being watched. We're going to think about that when we discuss the Baldwin shortly, okay? I want to touch on this, and then we're going to wrap up here. Considering the design and visuals at the bottom of 238, visual components play a significant role in many kinds of evaluation arguments, especially during political campaigns, most definitely. You can see that now, as the image on the following page suggests, but they can also be important in more technical arguments as well. Okay. As soon as numbers are involved in supporting your claim, think about ways to arrange quantitative information in tables, charts, graphs, or infographics to make the information more accessible to readers. Visual elements are especially helpful when comparing items. The facts can seem to speak for themselves if they are presented with care and deliberation. But don't ignore other basic design features of a text, such as heading for the different criteria you're using, or an online evaluation, links to material related to your subject. Okay. With that being said, I want you to be mindful or be careful if you would like to use images. I will have a class discussion. We have a class discussion due on Friday based on images from Get Out that I want you to just write about and think about more specifically, okay? But I also want you to not shy away from using images in your essay. But with that being said, it's not just to put up for no reason, right? If you want to unpack the visual rhetoric of Peele is doing there, that is what I'm looking for. Can you unpack the visual rhetoric Peele is engaging with? Because obviously the medium of the short story is not visual. A lot of it's in our mind. A lot of it's in Jesse's mind, which is interesting to think about as well. Okay, but when you think about visual rhetoric, how Peele produces this film, creates this film, directs this film, what do we see here that may be lost in translation with the words? That is important for me. And don't shy away from using images in your essay. Just keep in mind that that does not count towards the page count. So I will have to not deduct, but I will shorten that. But I want you to shoot for, if you're going to use images and they're pretty big, be understanding that that will cut into your page count. You still have to produce 5 pages of writing. Okay, that's it for this lesson. I hope this helps make the evaluation essay a little bit clearer. Okay, like I said, this is what I'm looking for ultimately. We've done evaluation in the first, for the first essay. Now we're looking at kind of more of a direct, specific type of evaluation based off of a resemblance claim. Okay, and as I've said before, please reach out with questions, concerns, etc. Okay, thank you for watching and have a good day. Bye.